Edward.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the January 2026 meeting of the Alternative Voting Methods Statewide Task Force. My name is Celeste Landry, and I'm the leader of this task force. And we have a great meeting agenda for today. Representative Bob Marshall is going to try to join us in between two other meetings to talk about his county commissioner elections bill for counties with over 70,000 people. And
And
then,
he's here.
oh, great. I think we should uh, jump to Bob Marshall. Um, Let me put up a screen that might be useful. And can Representative Marshall, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, that's great. I'm actually in my truck in a parking lot, so I'm just gonna go a cappella if that's all right.
I didn't do any introduction, so do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So
Oh,
I'm Bob Marshall. I'm the State House Representative for Highlands Ranch in Douglas County. Uh, I got down to, I guess, just as background, so you all know where I'm coming from. Um, I got involved in politics through good government activity and holding people accountable in the local government. I was unaffiliated, but since it was all Republicans that were, being held accountable, the Democrats took a real liking to me and asked if I'd run. So in 22, I became the first Democrat to win any partisan office in Douglas County in more than 60 years, and got down to the Capitol. I'm the most conservative Democrat in the Capitol, but I'm really interested in transparency and good governance. And neither party ever seems to be happy with that. So I'm kind of the weird platypus down there. So I've ran this county commission bill three times before, and it came to my attention because I represent Highlands Ranch, and Highlands Ranch makes up with Lone Tree 28% of the population of Douglas County. And we are totally integrated with Denver. We're a suburb of Denver. The light rail stops in Lone Tree, and the Zero Broadway line ends right in the middle of Highlands Ranch. We are totally integrated with Metro Denver. The rest of the county doesn't want to be a part of Metro Denver, and I can appreciate that. But our interests are just absolutely never represented at the county for a suburban area. And so I started looking around and realizing this is a far bigger issue than just Douglas County. Larimer County has three commissioners elected at large. So there's no one, and Boulder has three elected at large. Jefferson County, with 600,000 people, elects three at large and $1 billion budget. Adams County elects five at large. And I started doing the research, and these at large elections are just totally indefensible. When the United States first started, half the states elected their congressional delegations at large. And it was such a disaster in 1842, Congress came down and said, no more at large. You will elect all your Congress people by districts, because otherwise, the population centers put in everyone. So that's why we have the congressional districts we have today. And that was over the screaming of states' rights and local control at that time. After the Civil War, unfortunately, these at large districts or elections are always used to keep down a political minority. Doesn't matter who the political minority is. Unfortunately, after the Civil War, it became racial political minorities. So throughout the South and Midwest, all the boards of education, all the county commissions, all the city councils elected all their people at large. And so in all these places that had like a 65% white population, 35% black, the black population would never get a seat or any voice in their government. So finally, at any time they said, well, local control, let's vote on it. It'd be like 65% say, oh, everything's wonderful. There's no reason to change. And 35% saying, well, this sucks. We should change. They're like, oh, well, you lost again. Too bad. So in the 1980s, the Department of Justice basically marched throughout the country and wiped them out almost everywhere in conjunction with the NAACP throughout the 70s and 80s. This was the NAACP's bread and butter, was getting rid of these at-large elections on the local level. Colorado slipped under the radar because we did not have a discrete racial minority during that time frame to bring a case. So we still have these things, and the voting rights experts on the East Coast are shocked that we have, these at-large elections. So I've been trying to correct that issue by running a bill that just says the large counties And we can only do counties that are larger than 70,000. That's a constitutional cutoff. Below 70,000, our Constitution says they have to have 3 commissioners. So above 70,000, the legislature can intervene. And so I've been trying to get the large counties and requiring them to get rid of at-large voting for all their commissioners and go to 5 commissioners. The most important piece to that is getting rid of the at-large voting, but another big component is the 5 commissioners. Every year, all the commissioners that would be personally impacted scream bloody murder and come up with a million reasons why there's no way this is totally unfair, no way they can do it. And meanwhile, every year I've shown up with like the ACLU, Common Cause, ordinary citizens, good government experts, um, all saying this is ridiculous. But every year the commissioners put intense pressure on my colleagues to kill the bill. And every year so far, they've been able to accomplish that by a thin margin, but that's all you need. This year, I have Jen Bacon joining me as a co-prime. Last year, Junie Joseph wanted to join me as a co-prime, but leadership wouldn't let her. And my assumption is um, because of the racial history of these at-large elections, they just did not want, one of our black colleagues sitting there staring at our other colleagues and telling the story of what these at-large elections are. But Jen Bacon got permission to get on, and she's a civil rights, stalwart. She's the one who brought the Civil Rights Act last year, and that's another point she's been trying to make is there's a couple counties that are on a trajectory where they could wind up in court under the new Colorado Civil Rights Act with their at-large elections. So again, rather than going to court and spending millions of dollars defending the indefensible, maybe the outages change. But that's where we're at. And I see your slide is terrific. So the reason we have those 2 in red, Denver and Broomfield, they're constitutional counties, so they can't be impacted. We can't do anything by statute to them. And then El Paso and Arapahoe already have 5 commissioners elected by district, so they wouldn't be impacted by our bill. And then usually I have raised the threshold from 70,000 to 250,000 for Pueblo and Mesa. I have been very sympathetic to the unfunded mandate argument. I think for the massive counties, it's kind of disingenuous, but you know, $300 to $500,000 a year to have 2 more commissioners. And of course, then they say office space and free cars and all this other stuff, and they come up with like $1 million. But I'm like, $500,000 in a small county's budget is pretty significant. So I've been a little willing to move on the numbers, but getting rid of at large, and whether that's ranked choice voting or that's all by district, or even 3 districts and 2 at large, which I've offered them before, if that's what the people want, we would do that. But that's where we're at.
So let me go to the next slide. And I took this pretty much from the bill draft that I saw. So just to let everybody know, the counties with 70,000 people that have a board of county commissioners would elect 5 commissioners, that they would be required to elect 5. And there would be 2 options to elect the 5 commissioners. One would be 5 commissioners resident in a district, each in one separate district, and they would be elected only by voters of that district. And then the other option is the at-large option, which is a good at-large option. All the options that Representative Marshall has been talking about so far are plurality at-large, which is a winner-take-all system. But if you take an at-large district and you use a proportional ranked voting method, then you get excellent proportional representation, which is one of the goals of the Colorado Voting Rights Act. So I don't know if you want to say anything more now, Representative Marshall. I only have 2 slides, and I don't know how much time you have. I know you have another meeting soon, so thanks for coming. And if other people have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. And
Well, I can drone on for another minute real quick. So it's very basic right now, and I've not been too hung up on trying to get the perfect thing together because it will be amended. And again, my bottom line is to try and get rid of the at-large voting. I mean, last year I even offered right now for the citizens to change the structure of their county government, which has never happened in Colorado. Let me be, Arapahoe has changed, Adams has changed. Both of those were put on the ballot by and El Paso. All of those have been put on the ballot by the commissioners. So for citizens to try and change it, they have to get 8% of of people to sign a petition of who voted in the last Secretary of State's election. And for a statewide ballot, you only need 5% to get on the ballot. So they've almost made it proportionately almost twice as hard for people to change the structure on their own. And again, it has never happened. Weld County did home rule and established their own hybrid with 3 districts, 2 at large. But I even offered last year to just go down and just have them reduce the 8% to 5%. And I did that the first year too, amended it on the floor, and they still killed it. They just want absolutely no changes. So it is like Animal Farm. It's once they get power. The first year I ran it, I had a developer from Jefferson County show up out of the blue. I didn't even know this guy was coming, didn't know him, to testify. And he was like, for 10 years, I worked with the Democrats to take the county commission because it was so unfair to have 3 elected Republicans at large. Nobody's interests are being represented well. We fought him, we fought him, we fought him. We finally flipped it. And then it was, oh, why would we ever want to change? Oh, now we have the power. So that's why it's so hard to fix this, because whoever's in power, they don't want to see any changes.
So I just want to say that the League of Women Voters of the U.S. is in favor of proportional representation. And Betsy McBride asked, uh, proportional based on what? And the answer for the at-large elections using the proportional ranked voting method is that um, that's a candidate-based method. It's not a party-based method. So whatever candidates people, the voters like, the ones that are the most popular will get elected, and then the backup choices will get some of the extra votes if, and we'll be talking about that today. So these are good questions to ask Jen when she does her talk. Um, but I do have a request, Representative Marshall, which is um, instead of saying at large elections are bad, maybe we could say at large plurality elections are bad, because the second option on the screen is an at large election. It's just using a really good voting method. So, um, and the bill doesn't have that problem about uh, using at large in a negative sense. So
Yeah, it's just that's how it's historically been said, and how I mean, uh, when we talk about these at-large, even in the court cases, they talk about at-large elections. So again, it's shorthand for, I think, people in the know what we're talking about. And just as another factoid, there's only been 2 times in the last, I think it's 30 years where any local jurisdiction has tried to go back to at large when they already had districts or some other kind of method. Both times they were immediately struck down by federal courts because they were complete transparent attempts by a majority that was in power trying to, oppress or suppress a rising minority in that county. One in Texas, one in California. So again, it's very hard to defend these on democratic values. Just for political sense, though, I will tell you the Democratic coalition is not fans of the ranked choice voting, and I am going to be running into a buzzsaw on that being in there. They've already told me that America Votes, but I'm definitely putting it in, and we'll see where we go. But I just, like I said, first goal, get rid of at-large voting. Second, try and get to 5 commissioners. And people, Kyle Brown, who represents Eastern Boulder County, has supported it because same thing. He's like, we have a commissioner that's required to live here. She only answers to the city of Boulder. She doesn't listen to us. And the same as Tammy Story represents the mountains of Jefferson County. She's a Democrat, but she's like, yeah, we have three Democratic commissioners, but they only listen to the population center down in Lakewood. We have mountain issues, and they don't really care about them because we don't have the votes. So they both supported it. And the Republican GOP chair in Boulder County was a very savvy lady. She told me if we had five by district in Boulder County, we probably still will not get a GOP commissioner, but we will get a very different Democrat out of far East Boulder County and Western Boulder County. So again, it's trying to represent people's interests better as best we can.
Well, I got my hand up, and I just want to emphasize kind of the same points that Celeste is bringing up. I don't think we want to get rid of at large. And yes, historically, that's how people think about it, but we need to fix that thinking. Proportional voting methods are used around the world. They solve these problems around the world. The world does not understand why we do gerrymandering. Well, why we allow gerrymandering to be a problem. We really need to both have at-large elections and use a proportional method and call out anyone who has specious arguments against it. And I think it would actually both save money and solve the problem, each of the problems that has been brought up, to have three commissioners with a proportional method. You don't need to spend more money on more commissioners in a county that's not too big. It's not clear to me even that Boulder is so big that it needs that, but I really would encourage you to avoid conflating the at-large nature of an election with lack of proportionality, because there are places that even federal courts have agreed that a proportional voting method like STV, like the one that we're talking about here, proportional ranked voting, would solve the issue of lack of representation for whatever interest group or approach, whatever constituency wants change, given whatever the local circumstances are most in play in a particular election at a particular time in a particular place. So it's really the best of all worlds. And if you can get us in touch with the people who are arguing against it, we'd love to understand how they frame it and try to work that out.
Neil, I think part of the problem is that they hear RCV and they just think of Prop 131 and they are against it. Whereas Prop 131 was only the single winner take all version of ranked voting. We're proposing proportional ranked voting, and they're conflating the two. So a big part of the education, and maybe maybe Senator Bacon, right? She's a senator?
No, she's a rep.
A representative. Okay, Representative Bacon. Maybe she can uh, educate the representatives about the fact that proportional RCV is very different from single winner take all RCV.
Yeah, and just let me, the political reality is the people that are against it the most are the ones who understand it very well, but it's a power issue. They understand that it's keeping the people they want in power. So, we can make those arguments to those people, but I think it's going to go nowhere. Just like I have Ask Me, who, I would expect to be a good government outfit, but they love what they have in Adams County. They fought hard and they said they spent a lot of money to get the commission they wanted in Adams County with 5 elected at-large plurality, and they want to see no changes, so they said they're going to oppose the bill. So a lot of it at the end of the day is just people protecting the rice bowls that they have.
So
and they understand. It's not like they don't understand.
So would they be in favor? I mean, the Democrats are in power in the state legislature. Would the Democrats be in favor of doing this for every county? In the small counties, the ones that are not shown on this screen, you would have to elect 2 in one year and then 2 years later elect the third one. So the third one elected alone would be winner take all, but the two that are elected in the double year, the two winner year, they could be elected using the proportional ranked voting method. So, I mean, that would probably put a Democrat on at least half of the rural counties, because you only need 33% and a little over a third of the vote to elect somebody. So
Yeah, but
did
and
that
and
help?
again, no, because what's bad, but it's true, is the Democrats in Larimer County don't care what's going on in Prowers County. They want to protect what they have in Larimer County. So if the rest of the counties are, yeah, so it's a problem. And we already have, they slipped into the bill years ago, a couple of years ago, if you remember, when they even authorized ranked choice voting or proportional voting to be allowed at the municipal levels if people adopt it. They made it very clear that it will not be allowed at the state level until at least 12 municipalities have adopted it. And then we do a massive study to find out how it impacts marginalized communities. So I'm just saying the Democratic coalition is not supportive
Yeah.
behind this.
That was only instant runoff voting. That was not, and that was a direct attack on Prop 131. But that was only, I mean, cities only can use instant runoff voting right now. The league is working on getting the proportional version in use. So, any other questions for Representative Marshall?
I just want to appreciate you for being really honest about that lack of interest in justice, I'll say.
Well, it's not so much. I mean, there's still a huge learning curve, I think, for the population to put enough pressure on their um, elected leaders to make change. So I'm a little. I mean, in some ways, I've been hammered down on this bill every year, but I'm a little bit more encouraged. It's the first year I'm running it side by side with someone because leadership wouldn't let someone to get on. And now I got Bacon with me, which is very good. Senator Liston, who's a Republican, he's from El Paso County. He just told me he will prime it in the Senate so long as I find a Democrat to do it with him. Unfortunately, two of the Democrats that have done it for me before, both of them say they're far too busy right now to take something like this on. So I'm working that angle. If I get someone, um, I know the Colorado Young Democrats, they understand it very well. It sounds like they're very excited, which I hope might convince some of my colleagues to listen to them rather than the commissioners, because they understand it's just the good old boy network trying to protect themselves in these county commission slots.
Thanks for your time and
All
good
right.
luck at your next meeting.
Well, and thanks
Um,
for all you all do. Like I said, it's you know, politics is a special interest game, so you got to come and put pressure because one person shows up that has some power and says vote no, and nobody else says vote yes. They're just going to vote no.
And I'm guessing that this will be introduced by the February task force meeting.
It's supposed to be introduced January 30, but I put in a request to extend the deadline. I'll see if they'll allow it
Okay.
because I was hoping if I could get the two Senate sponsors. I think there's a few people I can try and get to co-sponsor, which would be very helpful. I mean, I don't want to take too much of your all time, but just as an aside, Senator Baisley is a Republican here in Dougco and represents like 7 other counties. He has a little piece of Dougco. He came to me last Wednesday and on the floor, it asked me, he said, I got all these constituents, conservatives in the mountains of Jefferson County, very irate at the school board because they're like, they never listen to us. They don't care about us. And it's because they elect all their people at large, plurality, but he said at large. Hey, Bob, would you help me? Everyone said you're the guy to talk to if we want to try and change that. Can we try and elect him by district? And I just had to laugh at him and say, oh, yeah, did you ever hear of my commissioner bill? Because Doug Coe's been the big stumbling block with the GOP. So again, I think people understand it once they have to deal with it themselves. So.
Great. And did you get the amendments that I suggested? Did you
I
get
saw
the
I
email?
saw the email. I
Okay.
have not
Okay.
opened it or looked
Okay.
at it yet.
Okay, great. Let's keep in touch and maybe you can come back next month. And
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, I get my 10-day extension and I can try and like I said, get hopefully a massive group of legislators that'll sign up that might cow the others into supporting it. So.
I saw Dwight Shillman's face appear. Did you want to say something, Dwight, just now, or?
Um, Sorry. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Doing too many things at once. Not really, no. I just wanted to listen in. The one thing I wanted to note, and Representative Marshall can take it or leave it. I'm not sure what it means, but I think the Article 14, Section 6 of the Constitution permits but does not require counties with populations more than 70,000 to have 5-member boards. And I'm not sure if that is a constitutional issue with your proposed legislation. And so I'm simply raising that point.
Yeah, the first year I ran it, we had it pretty well vetted for constitutional issues. So below 70,000, they're required to have 3. Above that, no one's ever challenged it on a constitutional basis or mentioned anything. And like I said, OLS signed off on it, said, yeah, they didn't see an issue. So I prefer to keep my mouth shut and not bring it up.
I only mention it because that section of the Constitution, Article 14, Section 6, says you can modify it by subsequent constitutional amendment. I mean, it's very specific about that. And I don't know what that means, Representative Marshall. I truly don't. But I deal with these issues all the time with counties and just wanted to raise it. I will leave that on your desk.
Thank you, Dwight. That's very interesting information. Okay. I think we'll go back to regular programming then, if that's okay with everybody. Thank you, Rep. Marshall. And so so far everybody's been very nice. We've had a productive dialogue. We'll keep that up. Here are the meeting minutes from last time. We had somebody from the Utah Senate District 11 approval voting vacancy election. That was fascinating. So if any of you want to hear about a much better way to do vacancy elections, check out last month's meeting and you can access it via our webpage for the task force. We also talked about enabling legislation for proportional ranked voting, and I'll mention some more on that. A few things on presidential election reform. If you are interested in presidential election reform, the speaker from last month suggests you check out approvalvotingforpresident.com. And Mark Bonhorst had attended one event, presidential election reform in a time of discord. I can send you the URL and passcode if you want to watch a recording of it. And also he spoke at the National LWV Committee to Abolish the Electoral College on the right of the people to choose presidential electors, the Constitutional Convention and ratification. That it was a bit in the weeds. It was recorded, and I can probably get that for you also if you're interested. I think we're going to skip meeting introductions because we don't have enough time, I think, to include those. But following up on the proportional voting news from last time, we continue to advocate for enabling legislation either in a standalone bill or as part of an elections omnibus bill. And there is already a mandate in statute for the Secretary of State to write rules for conducting a proportional ranked voting election, but there isn't much progress on that. The Colorado Voting Rights Act, which passed last year, and we've mentioned once or twice already, supports proportional voting methods, and enabling legislation would not require any jurisdictions to adopt it. It would just tell the Secretary of State, please write these rules. And if a jurisdiction does want to adopt proportional ranked voting, then the county clerks would have to run that election, assuming all the requirements are met. Some people like to know what a ranked voting ballot looks like. Question?
Celeste, on the COVRA, the Voting Rights Act, it's interesting that Rep. Marshall brought up the possibility of challenges, since that's new law and it absolutely is exactly the same. It's parallel to what I guess the Supreme Court did in 1844. Is that what I heard him say? So I just wonder if anyone knows anything about proposals to declare lack of representation in these big counties that have zero diversity.
Jen, I don't know if you know anything. You're kind of the voting rights expert. I think.
I don't think that the Colorado Voting Rights Act really provides anything to happen without a lawsuit. But it definitely provides some explicit grounds, on which underrepresented groups, and it's specific underrepresented groups. It's racial and language minorities, and there's some protections for Native Americans. But political parties are not a protected group, and I don't think the Colorado Voting Rights Act does anything to change that.
Okay.
Thank you.
What I've concluded is that you don't know if anybody can say this law is constitutional or this law is not constitutional, and it takes a court to decide whether it's actually constitutional. So anyway, here's that ranked voting ballot that I was mentioning, and the League of Women Voters of Colorado has an article in the Fulcrum entitled "What is RCV Anyway?" So you can check that out. And just to remind people, only the first choice is guaranteed to be counted.
So, Celeste, since we're short time, could I encourage you to skip this since it's in my presentation?
Sure. Okay. And oops. Do you want to, let's see. Are you going? Are you starting?
I certainly can start. Let's
Somebody
see.
stopped
Can I?
sharing.
Let me find my screen let me do a couple of things. So if I do that, then let me see if I can find the right screen to share, which is always a little bit of a challenge on Zoom. Where'd we go? Hang on. That's not what I wanted to share. Never mind. Hang on. I'm going to need a minute to find the right thing.
Okay. I'm going to go back to where I was. And whoops. So here's the difference between winner take all and proportional. In winner take all, 40% of the voters can pick everybody. This is the kind of election, the winner take all one is the kind that Bob Marshall was complaining about, whereas proportional is a good kind of at-large election. Okay.
All right, let me try again to see if I can share this.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay. There we go. All right, can y'all see that?
Yes, it's your view. It's not
Okay, good.
Now it's the slide view.
Okay, great. So this was from a community conversation that we had in Longmont a few weeks ago. I'll say what I said then, which is that I welcome questions, but let's temper that with the fact that this took a little over an hour when I gave it in Longmont, and we don't have quite an hour now. So we're going to talk about proportional representation, what it is, why it matters, how it works. So first of all, what it is. This goes back to John Adams, who said he was referring to the Congress, but it can apply to any legislative body. It refers to having a multi-member governing body that is an exact portrait in miniature of the people at large. So that means it should look like the people with regard to any number of things. You could be political party, race, gender, geography, any identity you can think of pretty much. And so what this means in practice is that sizable groups who are cohesive in their preferences for candidates should be represented in the governing body about in proportion to how much of the electorate they make up. Does that make sense? And I can't see any faces at all, so if you want me to know what you're saying, you have to make noise. So what kind of groups were we talking to? Like I was saying, political parties, racial, ethnic, religious, gender, neighborhoods, geography, supporters of particular issues. This one is particularly important maybe in local nonpartisan elections. City council elections often turn on some particular issue. So let me go back to that's sort of why it matters, or rather what it is. So now let's talk about why it matters. Well, fundamentally, representation is about a seat at the table, right? So we want everybody involved in elections to be represented. Also, when you have elections that tend to produce proportional outcomes, you get better voter engagement. You get more responsive elections because you don't necessarily have to constitute a majority of the electorate to get your candidate elected. So voters are more likely to feel and know that they have an impact on the outcome. And since they're more likely to affect the results, they have more reason to show up. You also get more responsive representation from your elected officials. When the elections matter and your elected officials and candidates know that they matter, they're likely to be a lot more responsive to voter concerns. So this better engagement goes both ways. You should get better interactions between voters and their representatives. So let me tell you, we've talked about this a little bit thanks to Rep Marshall today, but some ways that don't work to achieve proportional representation. The first one is at-large plurality voting, which we've been talking about, but in general, just to be complete, if there are N seats to fill, all the candidates run against each other for all the seats, and each voter can vote for up to the number of candidates that there are seats to be elected. And then the N candidates with the most votes, which may or may not be a majority, are elected. So what do you think is a typical outcome in an election like this? Thoughts?
You can unmute and speak.
Please speak, because I can't see you at all.
If you look at if you looked at the graphic that I had put up earlier, all the purple candidates won.
Yeah.
At large.
So this isn't 100% of the time. I'm sure we can all point to examples where this didn't happen, but a fairly typical outcome is that the majority group wins all the seats. Because if you've got more than half the voters who all support the same N candidates, then those N candidates will get more votes than anybody else, and they'll win.
And in the graphic that I had, the largest group was only 40%, but it still won all the seats.
Right. Yeah. So maybe the plurality group wins all the seats. And an important point, and particularly since we were just talking about voting rights acts, both federal and state level, this system strongly disfavors minority representation. And so many jurisdictions have been sued over the years for this system and forced to change to a different system when it disenfranchises racial minority groups. So that brings us to single member districts. I think we all kind of know how these work. You cut up the jurisdiction into geographic regions called districts, each of which elects one person to the governing body. Usually that election is a standard plurality choose one election, but it doesn't actually matter. Like even if you use a better voting method, like instant runoff voting to select this one person, the important part is that each district is electing one person. So what typically happens under single member districts? Well, most districts will be safe for some particular group with only a few competitive districts. How many articles have we seen lately about how few congressional districts are actually competitive districts or swing districts with the potential to change parties between elections? And this is a really typical thing to happen with single member districts. Single member districts are extremely subject to gerrymandering. It really matters who gets to draw the map and what their intentions are. It is possible in some circumstances for districts to result in proportional representation, say by party, meaning that the elected group, the elected body has about the same party proportions as the overall electorate. But it's still true that a large minority of voters did not vote for the representative for their district. So even if you have representation that looks proportional by party, that doesn't mean that everybody feels represented, right? If I'm a Republican in Denver, I'm never going to have my elected official represent what my opinions. And similarly, if I'm a Democrat, somewhere on the Western Slope, I'm never going to have a representative who represents me. So what happens one way or another is that a large fraction of voters feel underrepresented. How bad can this get? Well, here's an interesting example. The UK has a parliamentary system. They have a multi-party democracy, but they still elect their parliament from single-member districts. And so here's what happened in the 2024 election. I'll give you a minute to look, but I'm going to talk through this chart a little bit. So you may remember hearing the news about how the Labour Party had this amazing election and they just kind of swept everything. What really happened was, yes, they got a plurality of votes. They got more votes than any other party. They got about a third of the votes, but that third of the vote translated into almost 2/3 of the seats. So that's why this was such a successful election for Labor. It wasn't because everybody loved Labor so much. It was because their pattern of votes translated into this huge number of seats. Meanwhile, look at Reform UK. They got 14% of the vote and almost no seats at all. And a less dramatic but similar thing happened to the Green Party with 6% of the votes and almost no seats. But how about Liberal Democrats? Liberal Democrats had an almost proportional outcome. They got about 12% of the votes, less than Reform UK, but they got 11% of the seats, while Reform UK got almost nothing. So this is a very non-proportional outcome. And I should say, this was not a weird election particularly. This is what you get when you have single-member districts with plurality elections and a lot of different parties. So when you hear people talking about wanting more political parties in the US, careful what you wish for, because if we had more parties but kept our single-member district system of elections, this is what we would get. So the way to get more political parties is to not start with more parties, is to change the system to one that structurally supports proportional representation of multiple groups. And then you have a system in which multiple parties can thrive, and everybody gets a fair share of their representation. Are there any questions about this? This is a good place to pause. No? All right. If not, I'll go on. Let me give you another example about how things can be not so great with single member districts. In Massachusetts, congressional elections, Republicans usually get around 30 to 40% of the statewide vote. But in the last 30 years, no Republican has been elected to any of Massachusetts' 9 House seats. And that's a very non-proportional outcome. And that's the kind of outcome that sure sounds like extreme gerrymandering, right? It really sounds like Democrats are just drawing these districts to disenfranchise Republicans deliberately. That's not what's happening in Massachusetts. A mathematician named Moon Duchin, who's one of my close collaborators, she and her collaborators wrote, they did a detailed analysis of statewide elections over a 16-year period, and they actually showed that it is mathematically impossible to draw a majority Republican congressional district in Massachusetts. The problem is that 30 to 40% Republican voters are not concentrated anywhere. They're spread out very evenly over the state. So there's just no way to draw a line around them to make a congressional district that has more Republicans than Democrats. And here's an image from their paper. This is showing, I can't remember if this is counties or wards or what, but this is showing the most Republican counties in Massachusetts in varying shades of red. And you look how few dark red ones there are. Very few dark red ones, a handful of light red ones, but a congressional district's pretty big. And so what they showed is that even if you ignored the requirement for districts to be contiguous, there are simply not enough majority Republican areas anywhere in Massachusetts to draw a congressional district. So it's not gerrymandering, it's political geography. Okay, now I'm done talking about how to not get proportional representation, and I'm ready to shift to how it works. So this is a really good place to stop for questions.
Neil, you have your hand up. Do you have a question or is it left over?
I think it's left over.
Okay, anyone? Okay, well, proportional representation, how it works. So it
Can I
requires
interrupt for just a second? I want to know,
Sure.
is anybody surprised by the UK, surprised by Massachusetts? Maybe you could raise your hand or whatever. I'm just curious. Okay, it looks like Kathy was. Okay. And Barb Winnery, maybe. Okay, great. And just thanks.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I was just going to mention that when we were going through all the lawsuit with the Weld County commissioners, at the national level, we really had problems with the lawsuit with the majority minority party, mainly because the Latino vote was spread out around Weld County.
Yeah.
Luckily, when we did the redistricting, there's a large majority now that lives in the District 3 area. But when we were looking at the distribution of where the Latinos lived, we were confronted with that issue.
Yeah. And that's a really common problem in lawsuits under the Voting Rights Act federally, because one of the requirements of that, there's certain things you have to show. These are called the jingles factors after
Right.
a foundational case. And one of them you have to show is that it is possible to draw a district where that minority group makes up the majority. And if you can't do that, that's just one of the things you have to do. And if you can't do that, you have no case. And so one of the great things about the Colorado Voting Rights Act is that it explicitly does not require geographic concentration. So you do not have to satisfy Jingles 1 to bring a case under the Colorado Voting Rights Act. So that's a big improvement.
Yes, thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, so some things that you have to have in order to get proportional representation. You have to have multi-member districts. For the reasons I just showed you, single winner districts are never going to reliably produce proportional outcomes. So you'd have to have districts that each elect more than one person. And you have to have an electoral system that facilitates proportional outcomes. At-large plurality doesn't do it. So some examples that do, if all you care about is proportionality by party, then party list is what you want. Party list systems produce proportional outcomes by party by construction. And a lot of countries in the world use these systems. They don't guarantee proportionality along any other dimension. You won't necessarily get racial proportionality, gender proportionality, geographic proportionality, depending on the system. Some systems have a combination of districts and at large with party lists. But anyway, that's one option. There are some systems called semi-proportional. I'm not going to get into these. If you're interested, some names are cumulative voting and limited voting. I mention them because during the earlier history of Voting Rights Act lawsuits, like around, say, the 1980s, these systems were sometimes imposed as remedies after successful Voting Rights Act challenges. So it's not always the case that single member districts were the remedy. Sometimes you had these semi-proportional systems. What makes them semi-proportional rather than proportional is that they require some coordination on the part of voters and candidates. They're still subject to vote splitting in the way that some other systems are. And then there's proportional approval voting, which Neil, who's on this call, is a very big fan of, and he will be happy to tell you all about that sometime. And then there's the one I'm going to talk about tonight, which is single transferable vote. It has many names. It goes by proportional ranked choice voting. RCV for Longmont likes to call it multi-winner RCV. I'm mostly going to call it STV tonight, but these are all synonyms for the exact same thing. So how does it work? All candidates run for all seats. Voters rank all candidates for all seats. So from the point of view of voters, there's no difference between single winner and multi-winner ranked choice voting. Voters have the option to rank all the candidates, or maybe there's some maximum number of candidates they're allowed to rank if there's an overwhelming number of candidates. But voters just rank the candidates. In order to get elected, candidates have to reach a threshold of election. And before I tell you what that is, I'm going to ask you some questions. So for one seat, and I should have asked the question before I showed this, but how much of the vote do you have to win to get one seat? Unmute.
Read the slide.
50% plus one vote.
Right. So just over one half. Thank you. Okay, now I'm not going to show the next bullet point yet. If I'm electing 2 seats, what do you think that threshold should be? How many votes do I need to get so that 2 people can get that number of votes, but then that nobody else can get that threshold? What do you think? Okay, I'm going to tell you, it's a third.
That's okay. I have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen, let me put on professor hat for a minute. Don't be afraid to guess wrong. That's how you learn. Nobody's going to shame you here for guessing wrong.
Well, I would have guessed right. So
Excellent. But even if you would guess wrong, guess anyway. That's how we have a conversation. So for 2, it's just over a third, right? Because if I've got 2 candidates who each get a little more than a third, then there's less than a third left for anybody else to get. Okay, what if I'm electing 3 seats? Do we see a pattern yet?
Just over 25%?
Exactly, just over a fourth. So here's the pattern. In general, if I'm electing N seats, the threshold for election is 1 over N plus 1. So what that means is if I were going to elect, say, 3 county commissioners in an STV election at the same time, if a group of voters that consisted of just over a quarter of the voters got together and agreed on a candidate they wanted to support, they could get that candidate elected. So you don't have to have majority support to get elected in this system. And the more seats you're electing, the smaller groups that can get a candidate elected. Okay. The magic happens in the tabulation, which thankfully voters don't have to know about. But roughly in each round, here's what happens. Each ballot is counted just for its highest ranked candidate who is still in the race. This is important. Voters sometimes wonder, am I going to hurt my first choice candidate if I rank additional candidates beyond them? And the answer is no, you're not. My ballot is only counting for my first place candidate for as long as that candidate is in the race. But once that candidate, he's either been elected or eliminated, If I've ranked somebody else, then my ballot gets to count for my next choice. So I still get to have something to say about the election, even after my first choice candidate is no longer involved. Okay, so in each round, once I'm counting each ballot for its highest ranked candidate, if there's a candidate whose vote total meets or exceeds that threshold, they are elected. And then here's the magic. What if somebody has an overwhelming amount of support? What if somebody gets twice as many ballots as they needed to get elected? Then that's a whole lot of wasted votes, right? You can have a whole lot of people going, well, golly, I should have voted for somebody else since my favorite was going to get elected anyway. Here's the magic. Extra votes beyond what they needed to get elected get transferred to their next ranked candidate in the race. And in practice, the way this is done is that a fraction of every vote gets transferred. So in this example where my first choice candidate gets twice as many votes as they need, that means every voter who voted for them only had to spend half their vote on electing that candidate. And now every one of those voters can go give that other half of their vote to their next candidate. This is why this system is called single transferable vote. Everybody gets a whole vote, but their whole vote may be fractionally distributed among candidates.
Jen?
Yeah.
So I often want to vote for or want to support more than 5 candidates in a 5-winner contest. But so I figure who's going to win without my help, and then I vote for the others, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, but with proportional representation voting methods, you don't have to think strategically. You can vote
Right.
more honestly.
Right. Yes, that's exactly right. The way these ballots transfer means that you're safe voting honestly and you're not going to hurt your favorite candidate, or maybe you have your favorite candidate, you can honestly vote for them, but even if they're not very popular and they're going to lose, after they lose, your vote transfers to your next rank. So you can still have something to say about your preferences among the candidates who are more likely to win. And that's exactly right. I don't have to think too much about whether my favorite candidate is going to get too many or too few votes. I can just honestly vote for them and my ballot will be allocated the way it needs to be. Okay. If no candidate is elected in a round, then it works like the single winner instant runoff version. The candidate with the lowest vote total is eliminated, and any ballots that were counted for that candidate get transferred to their next candidate who's still in the race. So even after my favorite is elected, I get to just take my vote and walk over and give it to my next favorite candidate. And we're going to go through some examples where you'll see it's okay if this sounds like not enough explanation. We'll see some examples of how this works. So we're going to have an election. And my student Edward, who's on the call, is going to help me with this. We're having a fancy party, and we have to choose 3 desserts to serve. And our caterer has lots of options. So we have these following 12 candidates. And I'll let you look at the candidates for a minute, because what I'm going to ask you to do is rank your favorite 5. And we're going to have an electronic ballot that you can fill out in a minute. We would never, ever, ever use electronic ballots for a real election because of security issues, but we're not going to worry about that for this election. And the other thing I'm going to ask you as you make your selections in this election is try to remember how you vote, because I'm going to ask you later if any of your top 3 were among the winners. Got it? Okay, so here's what the ballot is going to look like. Things to know, some of which I've already said. So ranking the same option multiple times will not help it. Only the highest rank you give any one candidate matters. It's fine if you rank unpopular options first. If that option loses, you just go to your next preference. Ranking more options will not hurt your higher preferences. It just increases the odds that you get something you want. And this 6 is a typo from a previous version of this, but there's nothing wrong with ranking fewer than 5 if you really only have opinions about fewer than that. Edward, could you actually put the link to the ballot in the chat? Because
Yeah, I just said.
Fantastic. Okay, so Edward has put a link to the ballot in the chat. I'm going to leave the picture of the ballot up here, but this is just a Google form. And so you should be able to go fill out your ballot and submit it. And
It might
somebody
be
let me,
more helpful if you show the pictures of the desserts, actually. They're so appetizing.
oh, you're right. Let me go back to that.
I just want to say that Friday was National Pie Day. I went to a pie tasting event yesterday. I'm a
Oh,
little
Pie Day is
tied
March
out.
14th.
That's PI Day. This is National PIE Day.
Well,
But
everybody celebrates Pie Day with pie. All right. I didn't know there was a National PIE Day that was separate. All right.
And
Someone's going to have to tell me when we're ready to move on.
yeah, I see around 4 votes cast for the moment. Also remember,
Okay.
if you're a member of the team, I encourage you to vote because there's only 20 or so of us here. So the more votes we get, the more relevant the selection will look.
Edward, note that your text talks about ranking less than 6 options. I know we changed
Oh,
that.
whoops. I should have fixed that. Sorry.
You only get 5 options.
Yeah, you only get to vote for 5.
Don't worry.
All right, I'm seeing around 12 votes cast so far, so we're getting there.
Everybody vote. The election will work out better if we have more votes.
do you want us to vote our spouse's ballot too?
Sure, vote your spouse's ballot. Let's have a few. At the election we had last Wednesday or Wednesday before last, I think we had something like 40 or so ballots and it worked great.
Yeah, 45, quota was 12. That's nice.
Celeste, I'm trying to keep an eye on time. Do we need time at the end of the meeting after this?
I would love to have 10 minutes at the end.
All right, we might. We'll see what we can do there.
I could also talk in between if you'd like, while the votes are being tallied or anything like that.
Oh, well, I'm going to talk about Portland while the votes are being tallied, I think.
Okay. I was going to talk about Maryland.
Oh, yeah.
Green Belt, Maryland, whatever it is. Yeah.
All right, it looks like the number of votes has plateaued at 16, so I might run the election soon.
Okay. Hang on. Yeah, okay. So that was this. Okay. So while Edward is tallying the votes, I'm going to talk about a real example. So in 2020, the voters in Portland, Oregon, they adopted a whole new city charter, but as part of that, they voted to overhaul their system for their municipal elections. So the way they did it previously was that Portland had 4 city councilors elected at large by plurality, plus the mayor as a member of the council. This was not quite block plurality because they had numbered seats, so each candidate ran for one of the numbered seats, but they were all elected at large. Right, that's what I should have said. Okay, under the new system, so first thing they did was they expanded the council from 4 to 12, and they divided the city into 4 geographical districts that each elect 3 councilors. And here's the important part, the councilors from each district were elected via STV. Voters were allowed to rank up to 6 candidates, with 3 being elected. And Portland had its first city council election under the system just a little over a year ago. And I, together with Moon Duchin, who I mentioned before, and our other colleague, David McCune, we were asked by some groups in Portland to do a retrospective analysis of this election and try to understand how well it achieved its goals of producing proportional outcomes, specifically for racial minority voters, but also just in general. And so I'm going to tell you how that went down in one of the 4 districts. So District 1 is the most racially diverse district in Portland. It's about 64% white, 36% people of color. In this election, 42,800 odd ballots were cast. So the threshold for election was 10,718 votes. How did I compute that threshold? We're electing 3 candidates.
A little more than 1/4.
It's a little more than 1/4. Okay. There were 16 named candidates on the ballot for these 3 positions. And by the way, some of the other districts had more. I think one of the districts had 30 candidates. So there were a lot of candidates in these elections. We deemed 7 of these candidates to be viable, by which we meant that they were mentioned in some ranked position on at least the number of ballots they would need to achieve quota. If you aren't mentioned on at least that many ballots somewhere, then you can't possibly get enough votes to get to quota. So that was why we said that that was the threshold for viability.
Tell us again how many rankings were allowed on a ballot?
6.
Thank you.
And there were 16 candidates. So here are the viable candidates along with their racial identifications. So Candace Avalos identifies as Black and Latina. Loretta Smith and Terrence Hayes identify as Black. And Steph Routh, Jamie Dunphy, Timur Ender, and Noah Ernst all identify as white. So the first thing we did, we got the cast ballot records. So we were able to look, not only at who the reported winners in each, losers in each round, but we could actually see which candidates were supported by the same voters. And so the first thing we did was we constructed this candidate similarity matrix, and I need to explain to you what you're seeing here. So the way to read this is if you go across the top, so say the first row says, if I voted for Candace Avalos, and then as you read down the rows, how likely is it that I also voted for each of these other candidates? Green means it's more likely that I voted for that candidate than if I hadn't voted for Candace Avalos or whichever one. Purple means it's less likely. So green squares indicate basically slates of candidates that tended to be supported by the same voters. So what you see here is that Avalos, Routh, Ender, and Dunphy all tended to be, they had common support. And the particularly dark squares, the darkest ones mean that Jamie Dunphy and Steph Routh really had a lot of common support. The same voters really liked both of those candidates. Meanwhile, the voters who liked those candidates didn't much like Smith, Ernst, and Hayes. And among Smith, Ernst, and Hayes, there was a lot of common support between Smith and Hayes, who were the 2 Black identifying candidates. And also voters, Ernst and Hayes liked each other pretty well. Not much common support between Smith and Ernst. So that's what this is telling us. So these are the slates as expressed by the voters. And as it happened, this correlated pretty well with what had been identified in the press ahead of the election as being the slates. Avalos, Routh, Dunphy, and Ender were sort of the progressive slate. Smith, Hayes, and Ernst were the moderate slate. There's no conservative slate because this is Portland. And so that's basically, so when we're looking for proportionality, one of the things we're going to be looking for here is slate proportionality. That larger slate attracted more voters than the smaller slate. So a proportional outcome, you might hope that you would get 2 of the progressive candidates and 1 of the moderate candidates if you were looking for a proportional outcome. Any questions about that? Does that make sense? Okay. The next thing that we looked at, because this is one of the things we were interested, was who were the candidates of choice of voters of color? This is an important, subtle detail. You don't assume that Black voters are represented, for instance, just because a Black candidate gets elected. It's not about electing candidates of the same racial identity. It's about that group getting to elect their preferred candidates. So part of the analysis you have to do, say if you want to bring a voting rights lawsuit, is you have to do an analysis to identify who were the candidates of choice of minority voters, and you have to show that those groups of voters voted cohesively for those candidates. So this is an analysis that we did. And this analysis produces some pictures like this, which it's okay if you don't understand. But what this is giving me, it's giving me sort of ranges of likely levels of support for different groups for different candidates. So what the blue curves here are showing me is that everybody liked Candace Avalos. She estimated as having the strongest support among voters of color, but even among white voters, even more strongly among white voters, she was a candidate of choice. And she was in particular the candidate of choice of Hispanic voters when we looked at voters of color. On the other hand, when we singled out Black voters, you see that the green is the furthest to the right. Loretta Smith was the favorite candidate of Black voters, whereas among non-Black voters as a group, Smith was fairly further down. So this is the kind of output of the analysis that we do to identify candidates of choice for minority groups. Okay, so let me explain this. This is the histogram of mentions, by which I mean on how many ballots was each candidate ranked somewhere. This dashed red line is that threshold of election. And so you can see the viable candidates are exactly the ones who were mentioned on at least that many ballots. And then there were all these other candidates who were not. What we see from this is that Avalos had the most mentions. Steph Routh is second in number of mentions, followed by Dunphy, and then Smith, Ender, Hayes, and Ernst. But now, let me add to this first place votes. Whoops. Oh, sorry, I'm going too. Wait, something happened here. Hang on. Oh, this is not showing what it's supposed to show. Shoot, my thing is not displaying right. This was supposed to show how many first place votes each one got, but we'll see that in a minute, I hope, if my slides work correctly. But anyway, the first candidate elected was Avalos. The second candidate elected was actually Loretta Smith. That's maybe a surprise looking at the mentions. And the third candidate elected was Jamie Dunphy. So even though Steph Routh was mentioned on the second most ballots, it turned out she wasn't really she wasn't the first choice candidate of enough voters to get counted in the way STV tabulates. She had a lot of common support with Dunphy, and what happened was that most of those voters ranked Dunphy above Routh. So I hope we're going to see that. Oh, there it is. I was out of order. So that's the first place votes. And so you can see that even though Routh had the second most mentions, among these viable candidates, she actually had the second fewest first place votes. So that's partly explains why this happened the way it did. But anyway, I want to show you how the whole tabulation worked. So what I'm showing you now is round one. How many votes did everybody have? And then I've got the threshold of election there for comparison. Okay, so people unmute because now I'm going to ask you, how did this go? Round one, has anybody achieved the threshold of election?
No.
No. So that means we're going to eliminate candidates. And actually, I'm not showing you all the candidates who had even fewer votes than this. What actually happened was these non-viable candidates got eliminated in the first 9 rounds. So we get to round 10 and only the viable ones were left, but some support has transferred from those non-viable candidates. So these are now the tallies in round 10. And now we're actually going to see how the rest of the tabulation plays out. So does anybody have quota?
No.
Still no.
No.
Who has the fewest votes? And I should have put names on this slide.
Third from the bottom.
Yeah, third from the bottom. It's Ender. So he's out. And so all of his votes are now going to transfer to whoever those ballots ranked next. And so after transfer, that looks like this. And you can see, it looks like Avalos got the biggest share of his transfer, but some of them went everywhere. Avalos is really close, but she's not there yet. So we get to eliminate somebody else. And now it's Routh who has the fewest first place votes. So she's out and her votes will transfer. But watch where her votes are going to go and think about this in terms of that correlation matrix we saw. An awful lot went to Avalos and an awful lot went to Dunphy. Right? And now Avalos is over quota. So she wins. And then what happens in the next round is that excess is going to get distributed fractionally. So now we have some fractional vote totals because fractions of votes got transferred from Avalos to the other candidates who are still in the race. Okay, now what? Is anybody at quota?
No.
Doesn't look like it. And we've got 2 candidates very close, but it looks like Ernst is the one who's out. And so now we're going to transfer his votes, and a lot of his votes went to Hayes and Smith. Not so much to Dunphy. That makes sense because we saw that there wasn't a lot of common support between Hayes and Dunphy. Still nobody's at quota. Now Hayes is out, and we saw a lot of common support between Hayes and Smith. So let's see where his votes go. Look how much of that went to Smith, and now she gets elected as the second winner. And when her excess is distributed, this is interesting. Who's left?
Only Dunphy.
Dunphy is the only one left, and he doesn't quite have quota, but because he's the last one left and there's still a seat to fill, he gets the last seat. Now, how is it that he doesn't have quota even though nobody is left? Any ideas?
You could only rank 5 or 6 or.
Yeah, you were only allowed to rank 6 candidates, and not everybody ranked 6 candidates. So as candidates were elected or eliminated, some of the ballots became exhausted, meaning that there were ballots that no longer mentioned any of the candidates still in the race. So this is a thing that can happen. In Portland, District 1 was the only district where this happened in this election. So that's the winners. So how did STV do? Well, we got Avalos and Dunphy from the progressive slate and Smith from the moderate slate. So we got slate proportionality. White voters, Avalos and Dunphy were candidates of choice for white voters. So white voters got 2 of their favorite candidates elected. Hispanic voters liked Avalos, Black voters got Smith. So we got excellent racial representation. And here's a cool thing. About 71% of the voters had at least one of the winning candidates in their top 3. So you got a lot of the electorate that feels represented by this slate of winners. And about 80% of the voters ranked at least one of the winners somewhere on their ballot. So we got very broad representation in this election. So STV did what it was supposed to do in this election. And by the way, I'm not singling out District 1 because it was particularly special here. The same kind of results happened in all 4 of the districts. And STV performed extremely well in this election for proportionality. All right, Edward, how are we doing on election results?
Yeah, it was a very quick one. I sent you an email
All right,
with the
I am going to
results.
have to stop my share
Yeah,
because it is now time for our election results.
I'll say up ahead a disclaimer. There were no fractional transfers this election, which is a bit disappointing.
Oh, bummer. That's no fun. All right, let me go to.
That means there was no surplus, or
Yeah, everyone, all the candidates that got elected with exact quota.
Oh, that's kind of a bummer. Okay, so is this the election scene MP4 link?
That's right, in
Sounds
the
like
league.
you want to say something while they're.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to ask Gina a question about how Portland reported those results. I'm just curious.
They reported them, so they reported round by round totals on their webpage. And you can see all the round by round totals for every district. And they also made the cast vote records public. They were very transparent about this. And so, you know, we retabulated the election from the cast vote records and verified the reported totals to, you know, just make sure we agreed with it.
Did they just report round 1 totals on election night? Or
I don't remember. I think it was pretty quick though.
I'll find out.
Yeah, I don't remember how quickly they reported, but it was pretty quick.
I'm pasting a picture of what they currently have. I guess it's not certain that this is what they had on election night. And I'll give you a link as well. But they kind of show a full table of tabulation round by round.
All right. It looks like I can play this directly from Dropbox. So I think I'm just going to show that. Okay. So here's our first round totals. And Edward, what was quota?
Let me check that. It was 5.
Okay. So here's our first round totals. Lemon squares and chocolate chip cookies out to an early lead. This is a great video Edward made here. Okay. So what happens here? Quota is 5. Nobody's at quota. Hang on, let me pause for a minute. So we had a tie for last place here, right? if that happens, that just means you have to flip a coin and decide who you're going to eliminate first. So in the
Or
coin
follow
flip-
the predetermined rules, I think
Or-
Dwight would say.
Sure, or there's some predetermined tiebreaker rules.
Actually, for this one, it was a board, a tiebreak. It wasn't a coin flip.
Okay, so apple pie is eliminated, and so that vote gets transferred to their second choice, which is chocolate mousse. We still have nobody at quota. Now we eliminate pecan pie. And look, chocolate chip cookies have reached quota, and so they are elected. And this is a bummer that we don't get to see how transfers work. Oh well, so nothing transfers. So now chocolate cream pie is eliminated, and they transfer to chocolate mousse. Now we've got another tie for last place, so we're going to eliminate the fruit tart. Those votes went 2 different places, and now you can see who the winners are going to be. We've got lemon squares, chocolate chip cookies, and chocolate mousse. We've definitely got a chocolate faction going here. Okay, so raise your hand if one of these winners was in your top 3.
So those were lemon squares and chocolate
Lemon
chip cookies
square-
and chocolate mousse.
Okay, so this is a clear majority. Maybe almost everybody had one of your winners in the top 3. When we did this in Longmont, I felt like almost every hand in the room went up. So we got pretty broad representation. Hopefully everybody would be happy with one of these. Okay. Let me go back to my keynote presentation and see if there's anything else I really need to show you.
I
Yeah.
asked in the chat if Edward has the video from the other night.
Yeah, it's in that same Dropbox. It's trying to show.
Oh
show
yeah,
it.
okay. Let me go back to that then. We'll show you that one because that was cool. I don't see
And
it,
also,
right?
oh sure. Let me.
I only see this and the boost.
It might be in the previous email that I sent you. I'll double check.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Longmont backup. Okay. Let me go back and share this again. Where's my Firefox screen? Yeah, this one was cool. So quota was 12 for this one, right?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but we're gonna be able to tell in a second.
Yeah, we'll see in a minute. So this was the round 1 totals. And yep, quota was 12. So chocolate mousse got elected right off the bat. And there was an excess transfer, and so you got fractional vote transfers. And now we have elimination rounds. Chocolate cream pie is out, and their votes transfer. Then red velvet cake is out. And again, there had to be, some tiebreak rule for that. Now we've got vanilla cake eliminated. And now it looks like apple pie is eliminated. But you see how support coalesces, how when your earlier choices are eliminated, your support gets to transfer to something that maybe more people are fans of. Oh, now we have an election round. Lemon Square is elected. And then all these excess votes transfer. And you see how we have fractional vote totals now that came from those transfers after the winners? And now chocolate chip cookie, that one hurt when chocolate chip cookie went out. And now carrot cake was elected as the last one standing. Okay. All right. That was super cool. And then I think the last thing I was going to share was this keynotes. I've got one more keynote slide if I can find it, which is just some resources. Yeah. So this QR code here, but you can probably see better if I hit play. Yep. That QR code, or if you follow this confusing list of menus on a web page, this will get you to our the Boulder County League's explainer on proportional representation. We have a nice web page about that. If you want more information about STV specifically, Edward here has written a very nice blog post about that. And this study that I told you about the Portland election is available online at this link here if you want to read all about that.
Thank you very
All right.
much, Jen.
All right, and looks like I left you about 5 minutes.
I'll take them. I'm going to try to share. Okay. So does everybody see Democracy News here?
Yep.
Okay. There's a new group starting. It's called the Colorado Democracy Defense Coalition. It's been started by Colorado Common Cause. It's going to meet the first Wednesday of each month from 5:30 to 7. And contact Colorado Common Cause or the League of Women Voters if you'd like to register for the meeting. I'm going to zoom ahead now. Here are all those names for single transferable vote that Jen was talking about. And now I'd like to talk about a proportional ranked voting referendum that happened in Greenbelt, Maryland. They voted 2-1 in favor of an advisory referendum for the city to adopt this form of voting Jen was talking about that all of you have just participated in. And they had an interesting way of electing their council members. People had to get 40% in order to get elected. So I guess if somebody didn't get 40% and they were in the top 6, there had to be another election. I'm not sure. But in any case, the official result was 251 yes votes to 1,032 no votes. Not a huge city, but they had a couple other things on the ballot too. You can look at tomorrow if you want to, and this is all posted. I did just want to show you, because you have to have this 40% threshold to get elected, people tend to vote for lots of the candidates. You can vote for up to 6 in the current election, and people on average voted for 5.4. So I know, like in the city of Boulder, sometimes people will bullet vote so that their candidate gets more weight, but that happens less often here. There were only 2 candidates that did not reach the 40% threshold. And I have a call into the city clerk to find out what's been the follow-up to this. Has the city gone ahead and adopted it now that the voters have given them permission? I don't know. But anyway, I just thought this is another example of a multi-winner election, and the results might have come out differently. This is more similar to the first round of election, the first round tallies that Jen was showing than it is a single transferable vote or proportional representation method. So with that, let's see, there are a bunch of things in the chat. And the slides should be available. Let's see. Anybody, do I need to say anything about the stuff in the chat? I see Nicole Spear, who is a Boulder City Council member, mentions that it cost the city of Boulder $200 to $300 to make the switch to the single winner instant runoff voting for our election. The commissioner, okay, there's also in Boulder County a commissioner ballot measure, county commissioner ballot measure. But I don't think it would cost a lot more, Nicole, in the city of Boulder to run the single transferable proportional ranked voting for the council members that are elected. And there's also a way to fill the vacancies automatically like they do in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So lots to think about.
Well, I had a question about what Dwight was talking about. So if the Secretary of State were to write the rules for multi-member ranked choice voting, would that necessarily have to require also funding to be put apart for multi-county, multi-member ranked choice voting elections to be run? Or are those 2 separate problems?
Dwight, are you still here?
Yes, I'm still here. We already have rules not for proportional STV, but for how the rounds of tabulation must go in any single transferable vote method election. The thing that has always been difficult here is, if more than one county shares a proportional STV race, those counties can perform all rounds of tabulation on those ballots only. But in order to do the rounds of tabulation for the district, which includes more than one county in this assumption, they basically need to provide their cast vote records to a central tabulation authority, I'll call it, for lack of a better word. And those cast vote records can be placed in a database against which the STV tabulation algorithm can be run.
I should say, I mean, you're right, because this does have to be tabulated centrally, and that would have to be worked out. Portland had to deal with this because Portland has pieces in 3 counties. And Multnomah County, which is the majority of Portland, did the tabulation, but this did involve cross-county coordination.
I got it. Colorado law basically currently places the onus on figuring out who won on the DEO of the district who certified the contest to all the counties. I do not think that is an ideal solution. I think there are better solutions, but the legislature hasn't really passed on that yet. So, but I mean, we would need to, among other things, what at least if I had any decision-making authority, which I stress I do not, I would want to certify the voting systems we use in Colorado for these specific tabulation methods as we did for IRV. And then whatever centralized aggregation software is using, I think should also be tested by a federally accredited VSTL. So there are some steps. And I bet you I know exactly how Portland handled this. And we just need some direction from the legislature on that.
So, Dwight, in terms of needing direction from the legislature, what form does that take? Can you help us out here?
I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't speak on behalf of the Secretary of State's office, Celeste.
Maybe I can ask it this way. There was House Bill 21-1071, which did that accomplish what you're talking about for the single winner instant runoff voting?
No, it didn't. We were getting close with Representative Kennedy in the drafting stage, but he pulled out of it. And ultimately, it's the responsibility of the county clerk and recorder in a single county IRV race to certify the winners. That just doesn't work for a multi-county race because you have multiple county clerks and recorders, and you need a centralized aggregation system. No, that I'll talk to you offline about it.
Okay. I mean, the rules have been written now for the multi-winner instant runoff, multi-county instant runoff voting elections. And are those okay now?
Well, they still place the onus on. So currently under those rules, the counties that share the IRV contest provide their CVRs to the control county, which is a well-known concept amongst election officials in Colorado. And it is the controlling county that is required to do the complete tabulation for the entire district. The counties, I think it's fair to say, really want the Secretary of State to be in that position. And I think it's fair to say the current Secretary of State does not want to be in that position.
Wouldn't it just be so much easier to just do counties and not do multi-counties like county commissioner contests? They should be pretty easy to do.
Yeah, that would require it. I mean, you'd have to authorize the voting method for county offices, at least for
Yeah.
statutory counties.
And would Bob Marshall's bill be that authorization?
I haven't seen the bill, so I don't know. But it would. Somebody needs to address, we need a central tabulation authority to do
Okay.
these things. And so, and the legislature has always shied away from altering current law on the way, you know, for a plurality contest, the DEO of a district that encompasses more than one county, they certify their ballot content to all of those counties. All of those counties provide the DEO with the results from each of the counties, and it's up to the DEO to aggregate everything. It's an incredibly inefficient way of doing things.
Well, thanks for the insights.
Sorry. I'll probably have to go to Secretary of State prison after saying all those things, but
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for hanging in there all the way to the end. Is there anything else anybody wants to say, or before we're 6 minutes over, but happy to have all of you here.
just thank you, Jean, for the presentation. I understand a lot of this, but this is a new concept to a lot of Colorado election officials, and the way you explained it, hopefully one day will help me explain it to all the county clerks who will be
Thank
freaking
you.
out
I
about it.
posted in the chat a link to the video from the community conversation we had in Longmont, where I gave this same presentation, and there was a lot more discussion among the audience. There was a lot of Q&A at that, and Longmont Public Media recorded it and put it on their YouTube channel, and they did a lovely job with the recording.
Great. Thank you.
I will send it to a couple people who I know wanted to attend it. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to stick around and save the chat. And we can stop the recording, I guess.